Exercise 7. Toads and frogs belong to a group of animals called amphibians. Most species live partly in fresh water and partly on land. These animals have moist skin, have no external scales, and they have the head and trunk joined in a broad depressed body. There's no tail, they have short forelimbs, long hind limbs, and eardrums are exposed. Okay, so to compare frogs and toads, frogs are moist and slimy, whilst toads are dry and bumpy, skin-wise. And frogs have hind legs that are longer and bigger than their head and body combined, while toads are smaller in comparison. The external differences between a male and female toad is that the first finger of the male is very much swollen during the breeding season. The male has a dark pigmented areas at the angles of the lower jaws on the ventral surface of the head, and the female is generally bigger. The second characteristic is the most reliable when the rest fail to show. This is the female underneath and the male above. The axial region is comprised of the head, which is further differentiated with the snout, the external nares of the nostrils, the eyes, the tympanic membrane, and the brow spot. The next part of the axial region is the trunk, or part of the body posterior to the head. This is divided into two regions, the thoracic and abdominal regions. The thoracic region or chest region, which consists of the poison or parotid glands, and the abdominal or lumbar regions, which composes the anus and the sacral hump. The appendicular region consists of the forelimbs, which is further differentiated into the upper arm, middle forearm, carpus or wrist, manus or hand, fingers, also called digits, and prepollux, which is the rudimentary first finger. The next part of the appendicular system is the hind limbs, which consists of the thigh, the shank, the tarsus or ankle, the pes or foot, toes or digits, the web, and the prehallux. This is the small sixth toe that may be missing. For the internal organs of the toad, let's first talk about the pericardial cavity, which is a small cavity that holds the heart. This is located at the thoracic region. Two peritonea can be identified this way. The heart of a toad is a hollow pear-shaped muscular organ which pumps blood throughout the body. It has three chambers, mainly the ventricle, the auricles, and the cornus arteriosus, ventrally connected to the base of the ventricle. Next, let's talk about the pleuroperitoneal cavity, a body organ, wherein most of the organs of the viscera are suspended by their respective mesenteries. The pleuroperitoneal cavity consists of the esophagus. This connects the pharynx to the stomach. The stomach, a bag-shaped, muscular, slightly curved sac for digestion, wherein the anterior portion joins the cardiac region, and the narrower posterior region is in the pyloric region. The latter ends in a slight constriction to the pylorus, which marks its junction with the intestine. Within the pylorus is the pyloric valve, or pyloric sphincter. The stomach is also attached to the dorsal body wall by its mesentery, also called the mesogaster. The small intestine is a long, narrow, coiled tube extending from the pylorus to the much dilated large intestine. Its anterior portion is called the duodenum, and its posterior portion is called the ileum. Into the duodenum enters the common bile duct. The small intestine is suspended to the dorsal body wall by its mesentery, also called the mesenterium or mesentery proper. The large intestine, a large club-shaped, usually dark-colored tube continuous with the small intestine and ending with the anus or vent, also has parts called the rectum, the cloaca, the urinary bladder, the mesorectum or mesocolon. Embedded in it is a round dark red gland called the spleen. The liver is a digestive gland considered to be the largest gland in the body, occupying the interior half of the pleoperitoneal cavity. At the ventral surface of the liver is the rounded sac called the gallbladder. When filled with bile, the gallbladder empties into the common bile duct, which can be seen as green or dark lime running from the organ to the duodenum. Next is the pancreas, which is a long, thin, irregular, yellowish organ suspended in the omentum connecting to the stomach, duodenum, and liver. Both the bile and pancreatic juice secretion from the pancreas are carried into duodenum by a singular tube, the common bile duct. The kidneys have one pair, which are elongated dark brown in color. Next, let's talk about the gonads. For one, let's talk about the testes, a pair of elongated cylindrical yellowish bodies lying in the ventral surfaces of the kidneys. Next are the ovaries, dark organs attached to the ventral surface of the kidney. If not filled with eggs, they are flattened, small, pale, and irregularly shaped organs. The next gonad is the oviduct, which is paired, white coiled tubes lying lateral to the kidneys. These are the organs and their functions. On an easy way, the stomach mechanically breaks down food. The small intestine digests and absorbs. The large intestine is the storage of waste product and solidifies waste product by absorbing water. The liver produces bile and filters toxins and chemicals. The pancreas produces pancreatic or digestive enzymes. The gallbladder stores the bile. The spleen is the largest organ in the lymphatic system. It synthesizes antibodies, and it's basically the immune system, and it filters red blood cells. The kidney filters body fluid, reabsorption of essential ions and nutrients, and regulates acid-base balance and electrolyte concentration. Exercise 8. Respiration allows the exchange of gases between the external environment and the body, since it provides oxygen and removes carbon dioxide from the tissues. In addition to its homeostatic function, this is also responsible in regulating the appropriate acid-base balance of the blood. Primarily, this involves a mechanical process called pulmonary ventilation, also known as breathing, which allows the inflow and outflow of air across exchange of surfaces. For toads, also called as Rhinella marina, toads allow the exchange of gases with the external environment through respiratory surfaces such as the skin and lungs. The thin membranous skin of the toad enables the diffusion of gases between its blood vessels and surroundings. This is called cutaneous respiration. They are also capable of pulmonary respiration, which allows the exchange of gases in and out the lungs. These are thin-walled, spongy structures that are connected to the base of the laryngotracheal chamber, which is here, somewhere here, with the help of a short tube called the bronchus, also called bronchi. In addition, the walls of the lungs are composed of air sacs known as alveoli. The first stage of pulmonary respiration starts when the toad closes its mouth and lowers the floor of its buccal cavity or oral cavity, which acts as a pump. As a result, the air enters through the outer oval openings of the nasal cavity, called as the external nares. The air is further drawn into the internal nares, which are two openings found in the roof of the toad's buccal cavity. The air cannot pass through yet the lungs, since the glottis, which is an opening from the mouth into the lungs, remains closed. During the second stage, the spent air from the elastic lungs is released as the glottis opens rapidly. The air moves through the buccal cavity and is released through the open nares. In the third stage, the fresh air held in the buccal cavity is drawn to the lungs as the nares close. The floor of the buccal cavity arises, the glottis opens. During the last stage, the glottis closes while retaining the air in the lungs, and the nares open again. For the physiology of breathing for Homo sapiens or humans, the process can be divided into pulmonary ventilation, which is the mechanical process of moving air into and out of the lungs, and gas exchange, the exchange of gases across the respiratory membrane. What are the mechanics of breathing? Air moves from higher pressure to lower pressure. Normal atmospheric pressure is measured by mmHg or millimeters of mercury, and the standard air pressure is 760 mmHg. Okay, now how do we do this? Inspiration, also called inhalation, is when the diaphragm contracts, which increases the volume of the thoracic activity. This leads to a decrease in the pressure, thus air moves from the atmosphere into the lungs. Next is called expiration, also called as exhalation. This is when the diaphragm relaxes, which increases the pressure in the thoracic cavity, wherein the air moves out of the lungs. What are the other parts that you need to know? The larynx. If you will place a stethoscope in this area, you can hear the tracheal and bronchial sounds. The triangle of auscultation is the ideal area for listening to the sounds because of the thoracic cage is not covered by the muscles. So let's talk about respiratory sounds. Healthy lungs should sound smooth and airflow should smoothly go in and out of the lungs, whereas congested lungs have wheezing or rattling sounds when you listen to them. Now let's talk about the chemical factors related to breathing. The cellular respiration is higher in running compared to sitting because you need more energy in running. Thus, more CO2 is produced as waste product from cellular respiration. Chemoreceptors will detect this change. This will then send signals to your brain, and your brain will then send signals to increase your breathing or respiratory rate so that you could exhale the excess CO2 and inhale more oxygen. Next, let's talk about the breathing holding baseline rate. Your breathing holding capacity without the effect of other factors, or when you need a paper bag or when you're hyperventilating. And the carbon dioxide and breath holding is the level of carbon dioxide in your blood that has been elevated in the breathing of air in the paper bag, decreasing your breath holding capacity. Let's talk about hyperventilation and breath holding. You inhaled and exhaled maximally. Carbon dioxide is in your blood has decreased, which is increasing your breath holding capacity. Your brain can't detect oxygen levels. Your brain will use the amount of CO2 as an indirect signal as to the level of oxygen inside your body. High CO2's brain interpretation is equal to low oxygen. Your brain will then dictate you to inhale. There's an urge to breathe. And when you have low CO2, the brain's interpretation is to exhale. High CO2 levels can change the acid-base condition in your body. CO2 can react with water to form carbonic acid, therefore making your body fluids more acidic. Let's look into the terms. First is hypoxia, or the deficiency in the amount of oxygen reaching the tissues. Next is dyspnea, or the difficult or labored breathing. Next is orthopnea. Orthopnea, shortness of breath that occurs when lying flat. Apnea, suspension of breathing. There's no movement of the muscles of inhalation and the volume of the lungs initially remains unchanged. And asphyxia, a condition arising when the body is deprived of oxygen, causing unconsciousness or death, also known as suffocation.